You ready? Okay, I am calling to order the reconvened November 4th, 2022 meeting in the Montgomery County Election Board, noting the presence of all three members and our chief clerk is online. The first agenda item is amendment of the agenda.
Yes, as we recessed the meeting last Friday and are reconvening today with new agenda items, under the Sunshine Act, a resolution is required approving the amendment of the agenda before we can actually add those items.
Okay, I will make a motion to amendment of canvass board, appointment of election tabulators, authorization of appointment of county employees to the canvass and provisional boards, motion to include absentee and mail-in ballots with incomplete dates, and motion to include absentee and mail-in ballots where voters use their birth dates to the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any board comment? Hearing none, I'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Okay, agenda is amended. Any election board comments? All right, and now we'll have a public comment on items appearing on the agenda.
As a reminder, this is the same comment. Rules apply. All speakers should sign the meeting sheet available in the back of the room or virtually, as indicated by Ms. Francisco. All speakers should come to the podium if they're physically able. Speakers should identify themselves by name and municipality. Those seeking to speak during the time set aside for public comments on items appearing on the agenda must state the specific agenda item they wish to address. All public comments must be relevant or germane to county business. Under the law, this means that the subject matter of all comments must be limited to items or issues which are currently before the commissioners for consideration or which may come before the commissioners for consideration at a future meeting. Whether a matter is germane to county business is a determination to be made by the county solicitor. Time limit of 2 minutes will be monitored, and county staff will respectfully request speakers to conclude their comments if the speaker goes beyond the time allotted. The board is not required to respond to public comments during the course of the meeting, so the public is reminded this is not an opportunity for dialogue or questions and answers. Board chair may direct appropriate county staff to follow up on any questions or additional comments after the meeting. Disruptive behavior, including but not limited to yelling from the seats, arguing whether a matter is germane to county business once the solicitor has made a determination on such, refusing to yield the floor once time has elapsed and request to sit down, shall be grounds for removal or muting from the meeting without further admonishment or warning. And as always, commissioners welcome written correspondence, comments, and feedback to commissioners@montcopa.org.
It just looks like we have a little bit of a issue with the sharing, so I'm just gonna, we'll have to just use a timer with each person. Okay, 1 second. Okay, great. So we will start with Giuseppe Crane Monticelli, who has agenda item comment on A and item L.
Giuseppe Crane Monticelli, Conshohocken Borough. My agenda item comments going to be on K and L here. You know, I believe both of these are dealing with where you're allowing people to, if they're putting down their birthday or their month and year, to that to be correct. The letter, the letter of the law reads very clearly. It has to be the date that they signed it on the ballot envelope. Assume that's what this is talking about here. Of course, like what I brought up in many meetings before, we don't have a detailed agenda beforehand. We don't know what we're going into. And that would conclude my comments on agenda items.
Next we have Stan Casasio, who has agenda item comment on item L.
Good afternoon, everybody. Of course, my comment has, again, talking about cleaning the voter rolls up of people that shouldn't be on it. It's a very simple case, and I was hoping that the commission will be able to make it a policy that the voter rolls are checked and cleaned up every 30 days. So that people that have moved out of the state, people who died.
I'm sorry, this has to be related to items that are specifically on the agenda.
Oh, I thought this was the.
There's no general public comment because this is a reconvened meeting.
Oh, okay, then I misunderstood. But anyhow, that's my biggest point. Thank you.
Now that you've crowded.
Next we have Pauline Braccio, who has agenda item comment on item P.
Real slick, not having general public comment since you're reconvening.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, I guess I could object to that, but it doesn't really matter, does it? You have on here appointment of election tabulators. And I don't know what Dory's going to say because I haven't heard it yet, but I would like to be one of those tabulators. I've volunteered in past and I was told no, that I was not needed, but I want to know how do I get to be a tabulator? I like to go after the election and help with whatever it is, the process that is done with the ballots. So can you tell me how I can do that?
You can call voter services.
Yes, and they tell me they don't need me, then how do I
So
know?
if they don't need you, then they don't need you. You can call
Okay.
voter services.
You can change your tone of voice, Ken. The other thing is, when Ken made comments on the reporter, I believe that Ken should be dismissed because county employees are not supposed to be show artists. Thank you.
Next we have David Morgan, who has agenda item comment on item K.
David Morgan, Ambler. I have a question about, should the election board chair be impartial? Commissioner Lawrence, on page 1 of Thursday, November 3rd edition of Reporter, the newspaper, in a report entitled "Court Ruling Doesn't Change County Process," you were quoted in your capacity as election board chairman. But as citizens read the
Mr.
article
Morgan?
on page 3, they discover
Mr.
this
Morgan?
comment from you. This is a comment about the election board.
This is a comment that needs to be about on the agenda items, that were added for today's.
The agenda
Reconvene
item is
meeting.
about election board comments.
That's a general public comment issue. It is not about issues that are on today's agenda.
I have an objection. Mr. Morgan's allowed to speak to whoever he feels is applicable to that agenda.
I object also.
Noted.
Okay.
You should
Mr.
continue.
So I think it
Mr.
would be.
Morgan, you'll need to limit your comments to issues on the agenda.
So this is related to the election board chairs making comments, and he's making comments today. So
Mr. Morgan, that is not an issue or item on the agenda
Instead
today.
of stopping him and tromping on his constitutional rights, Josh, let him finish. Give us a lousy 2
Ms.
minutes. You can't.
Braccio. Please keep your comments to yourself.
yeah,
Mr.
I'm
Morgan.
just reading clearly from your agenda, and it says election board comments. So I'm talking
Mr.
about election
Morgan,
board comments, and that's what it says. So
Mr. Morgan, the rules are very clear.
No, they're not.
the title of what's on the agenda is very clear.
You can either choose to give comment on issues on the agenda today, or you can sit down.
Well, coming about this election comment, I recommendation of just one candidate. I think this meeting should be about mentioning something nice about all candidates. We have people running from different offices for governor.
Mr.
other
Morgan,
than
I'm going to have to ask
our
you to
local
please sit down. If you're not going to keep your comments germane to issues or items on today's agenda, then please sit down.
Objection. Is this an election
Objection.
board meeting?
Second the objection on the record.
Mr. Morgan, please sit down.
I think my comments are interesting.
Me too.
Beyond Mr. Shapiro.
Their eyes just glaze over, David. They don't care.
Next we have a couple folks logged in online. First, we have Adrian Seltzer. You can unmute.
Hello, excuse me, Adrian Seltzer, Lower Merion. I want to comment on item R. To me, the only reason that not having a date on a ballot that arrived before 8 p.m. tomorrow is to keep voters from voting. So it's not a material issue. You know, the ballot arrived then. What difference does it make whether they sign it or the date that they signed it, or they date it with their birthday or with any other date? or no date at all. It's immaterial to actually voting. So that's my comment. And I have approved that. And how do I find out if I volunteered to be an election tabulator a couple of months ago? How do I find out? Do you have a list of them? Will that be online? Thank you.
Call voter services.
No, okay.
Next we have Jamie Mobill. You can unmute.
Good morning. I think you can hear me. This is regarding the same as previously spoken. I'm Lower Marion, by the way, and also president of the League of Women Voters. This is regarding counting ballots and curing ballots. With respect, the gentleman that spoke before about letter of the law, it actually is not clear about what is a correct date. And that is why I want to thank the county because they are trying to do their best to count every ballot under the ever-changing law that isn't clear. And so I thank you for curing ballots, allowing those who haven't signed or maybe have an incorrect date to fix their ballot, and hopefully that materiality, because it is immaterial, you've received, even the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has said in giving you timelines that it's when you receive the ballot. That is what is under the law. By 8 p.m. on election day, you must receive the vote by mail ballot. And so it's the receipt of the ballot, not the date that is put on there. So thank you for curing. I'll be speaking in general public comments before, and I do encourage the county to please publish, as other counties have done, the list of those individuals who can cure their ballot, because it shouldn't be a partisan thing. I believe the parties have received lists, but there are many unaffiliated and third-party voters who also vote by mail that should be able to access that list and know if they can fix their ballot. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Suzanne Stepanek. You can unmute.
Yes, I heard you say earlier that there are going to be no general public comments in this meeting. However, on the agenda, which I just printed out, item E says general public comment. So I just want to be clear about whether there is or there isn't.
John, you want to explain?
So this is the amended agenda that from the meeting which convened on Friday, and that was recessed until noon today. And thus the additional agenda items came in under J, amendment of the agenda and forward. So the public was given opportunity to give public comment on these additional items because they would not have obviously had a chance to comment them on Friday. But general public comment would be have been made on Friday for this meeting.
We can move on, Kelly.
That concludes our public comment.
All right, next up is approval of the minutes. I will make a motion to approve the October 20th, 2022 minutes of the Montgomery County Election Board. Is there a second?
Second.
Any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Minutes are passed. Next agenda item is appointment of temporary poll workers. Ms. Sawyer.
Good morning or good afternoon, Election Board. Section 2675 of the Pennsylvania Election Code permits the Board of Elections to temporarily appoint qualified individuals to fill any vacancies occurring at any time in the 5 days preceding an election. There's a list attached to your agenda entitled Poll Worker Appointments for the 2022 general election. We are requesting that the board move to approve the individuals in this list to serve in the named election districts in the named positions for the November 8th, 2022 general election and for this election only.
I will make a motion that the people whose names are set forth on the attached document titled Poll Worker Appointments for the 2022 general election as non-elected poll workers are designated to serve as members of the various local boards of election throughout Montgomery County for the date of the general election, November 8th, 2022 only. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Arkush. Any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Motion passes. Appointment of Canvas Board, Ms. Sawyer.
Section 3146.8 of the Pennsylvania Election Code states that the Board of Elections is to conduct the pre-canvass and canvass of votes cast via mail-in and absentee ballots. The code gives the board authority to delegate their responsibilities to representatives authorized to act on the board's behalf. You've been provided a document titled Canvas Board Appointments for the 2022 general election, and I am requesting that the board vote to approve the people named on that list to serve as the Canvas Board for the purpose of canvassing the mail-in and absentee ballots cast in the 2022 general election.
I will make a motion to appoint the names set forth on the attached document titled Canvas Board Appointments for the 2022 general election to work as members of the mail-in and absentee ballot canvas board to assist in the computation of the general election held on November 8th, 2022. Second. Second by Commissioner Arkush. Is there any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Motion passes. Appointment of election tabulators.
The election board is given the authority to appoint qualified individuals to serve as election tabulators by the Pennsylvania Election Code. There's a list attached to your agenda entitled Tabulation Board Appointments for the 2022 general election. We are requesting that the board move to approve the individuals on this list to serve as election tabulators for the November 8th general election and for that election only.
I will make a motion to appoint the names set forth on the attached document titled Election Tabulator Appointments for the 2022 general election to work as members of the Election Tabulation Board to assist in the computation of the general election held on November 8th, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Did I just read the same motion that I did before?
No,
We just paid. Okay, that's what I thought. Any board comment? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Motion passes. All right, and now Q, authorization of county employees to be appointed to the canvass and provisional boards.
Section 3050 of the Election Code states that in the days following the election, the Board of Elections shall examine provisional ballot envelopes to determine if the individual voting the provisional ballot is entitled to have that ballot counted. Section 3146.8 of the Election Code states that the Board of Elections is to conduct the pre-canvass and canvass of votes cast via mail-in and absentee ballots. The code gives the board the authority to delegate their responsibilities to representatives authorized to act on the board's behalf. You've been provided a document titled County Employees for the 2022 general election, and I'm requesting that the board vote to approve the people named on that list to serve as the provisional board for the 2022 general election and as additional staff for the pre-canvass and canvass for the purpose of examining and making determinations as to what provisional ballots may be counted and to assist with the pre-canvass and canvass of mail-in and absentee ballots.
Okay, I will make a motion to authorize employees on the attached list of individuals titled County Employees for the 2022 general election to be appointed to work as members of the mail-in and absentee ballot canvass board, provisional board, and tabulation board to assist in the computation of the November 8th, 2022 general election. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Arkush. Any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Okay, motion passed. Thank you, Sawyer.
Thank you.
Mr. Marlette.
Good afternoon, members of the board. At the end of October, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court issued an order stating that counties were to segregate and not count undated and incorrectly dated ballots for the November 8th, 2022 election. While the order directed counties to not count incorrectly dated ballots, it did not offer any direction as to what an incorrectly dated ballot was. The election code is also silent as to what would constitute an incorrectly dated ballot, as the language in the code only directs voters to sign and date the ballot, generally with no other specific instruction. On Saturday, November 5th, the court issued a supplemental order outlining that incorrectly dated ballots were those that did not fall into the following date ranges. For mail-in ballots, it's September 19th, 2022 through November 8th, 2022. And for absentee ballots, it's August 30th, 2022 through November 8th, 2022. In response to that order, election staff have been working to segregate all undated ballots and those ballots that have been dated but fall outside of that date range. In doing so, we have encountered two specific groups of ballots that require a board decision on inclusion in the canvass. The first group consists of ballots with incomplete dates. We have identified and segregated the majority of ballots that are subject to this court order. And at this point, there are approximately 100 that are still yet to be reviewed and flagged for any sort of issues. We will also have to review any ballots that come in through the rest of the day today and then tomorrow before 8 o'clock. With that said, at the moment, we have identified 21 ballots that have been returned with at least one of the month, day, or year missing from the date line. Again, as we go through ballots today and tomorrow, that number could grow. For these ballots, we believe there are instances where it can be properly determined that the voter dated their ballot within the acceptable window in which to do so. For example, if they wrote the day and the month but not the year, it is reasonable to determine that the day and month are from the year 2022. If they wrote the month of October and the year 2022 but no specific day, it's reasonable to determine that it was returned within the time period because it encompasses the entire month of October. There may be other instances that arise where the canvass board can accurately determine that a partially dated ballot was returned in the proper time window. And it's a long-held standard in Pennsylvania law that the court should be construed liberally so as not to disenfranchise voters unnecessarily. Considering the numerous variations of the month, day, or year combinations and the various situations that the canvassers may encounter, I'm requesting that the board entertain a motion to permit the canvass board to examine these ballots, and if a determination can be made by the canvass board that the date provided is sufficient and correctly places that ballot within the acceptable time frame in the court's order, that those ballots be included in the count.
All right. I will make a motion to authorize the canvass board to incorporate ballots where the information in the date line is sufficient to determine the ballot was returned within the appropriate date range into the computation of the November 8th, 2022 general election. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll make the first comment. It's unfortunate that we're dealing with this the day before the election, and I will hope that after this election that the General Assembly or the courts or someone will get us some clear clarity on that. Notwithstanding that, I do not want voters disenfranchised because of a technicality. So I will support this motion.
Mr. Arnold, just one question, just so everyone is clear. Any ballot that comes back with no date at all on it, we are not counting.
That is correct. We are not counting those ballots.
Right. So those are a different category. We're talking about ballots where the voter made attempt to put the date on there. The ballot's been returned physically to us within the allowed time frame. And so we're going to allow the canvass board to see if they can determine whether or not that ballot's been received in the proper time with an attempt at the proper date.
Correct. If it's an incomplete date, if they have listed a complete date and that complete date falls outside of the required time frame for the court's order, those are also being segregated and not counted at this point. But impartial dates would be the subject of review for the canvass board here.
Well, in the interest of following decades and decades of Pennsylvania election law, which has been to work to make sure that voters are empowered to vote and not disenfranchised, then I too will support this.
Mr. Marlett, you mentioned that on November 5th, the state Supreme Court issued some type of clarification related to this. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, they issued an order, a supplemental order on 5th, where they said that the ballots that were to be segregated as incorrectly dated were to fit within a specific range. They had a range for both mail-in and absentee ballots. As to anything outside of ballots in that date range, they did not issue any further guidance in that order.
So that would mean that on the date line, it would have to have the month within the range, which would be September to November, and the year, but perhaps it's missing a specific date of that month.
That would be one that the canvass board would be able to consider, yes.
And are all the other counties across the Commonwealth following the same procedure?
I can't speak to what other counties are deciding to do. I
I know what we're doing here with Montgomery County. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to opine on the conduct of other counties here because I don't think any of them have made a decision at this point.
Okay, my viewpoint is the whole entire election law is screwed up, and I agree with my colleague on the board that the General Assembly and the courts should put clarity to the election laws that Pennsylvania is operating under. But the Supreme Court ruling clearly states any undated or incorrectly dated ballots cannot be and should not be counted. And this obviously is not properly dated. So I can't support that, knowing that the issue coming from the law, which is vague, would consider that incorrect. So we'll need a roll call vote.
Ms. Washington. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, motion passes 2-1. Next, inclusion of absentee and mail-in ballots where voters listed their birth date and the date line in the canvas. Mr. Marlette.
So as you stated, the second group of ballots for consideration consists of ballots where the voter wrote the birthday and the date line of the declaration. For these ballots, our staff segregated any dated ballot that could possibly be associated with a birthday of the voter. Those ballot declarations were checked against the voter's registration information in the statewide Uniform Registry of Electors system. The ballots where the date was not determined to be a birthday were set aside to not be counted. The number of ballots where the date was determined to be a birthday is currently at 2. But again, as I said earlier, we have more that we'll be evaluating throughout the day today and tomorrow, so that number could grow. The law has been clear, as I've said before, that the election code should be interpreted liberally so as not to unnecessarily disenfranchise voters. And it is reasonable to believe that voters who used a birth date did so because they assumed the birth date was required as further verification of the qualifications as a voter. And in an instance where voters have taken purposeful and understandable action to comply with the date requirement in such a manner, it's not unreasonable that those ballots could be included. So I'm asking that the board consider a vote to include ballots where voters use their birth dates in the declaration in the canvas for this election.
I will make a motion to authorize the canvas board to incorporate ballots where the voter listed their birth date and the date line of the voter's declaration on the return envelope into the computation of the November 8th, 2022 general election. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Arkush. Mr. Marlette, you said there's 2 ballots?
Yes.
Where we determined this to be so. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to support the motion as I did the previous one to enfranchise people, but are there any other?
Yes, I have a comment. This further galvanizes my stance on the importance of in-person voting because problems like this can totally be avoided. And it points out the problems associated with mail-in voting. So again, the law says if it's incorrectly or undated, it cannot be counted. And these are incorrectly dated ballots where that decision is now placed to be determined in our hands instead of the voters' hands. Where if this was in person, ideally, it could have been avoided. So we'll need a roll call vote.
Yeah, I'll just add one additional comment, which I've talked to numerous voters who almost put their birth date on the back of that envelope, assuming that it was part of the identification process. I think it is a very easy mistake to make. And so with the interest of wanting to enfranchise voters who clearly followed all of the steps to get their ballot, sign the ballot, return their ballot on time, but made a simple error in interpreting date on the back of their envelope, I will too support this.
Ms. Washington. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, motion passes 2-1. Closing board comments. So tomorrow is the day. I want to thank our voter services department who has been running the election for a month now, and thank all of our poll workers who will be out tomorrow. I would encourage all voters to check your polling location if you're voting in person tomorrow, or make sure that you use one of our drop boxes by 8 p.m. tomorrow. We must receive mail-in ballots by 8 p.m. tomorrow. Postmarks do not apply. Any other closing comments? All right, hearing none, I will make a motion to adjourn the November 7th, 2022 meeting of the Montgomery County Board of Elections. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Arkush. Any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Are there any negative votes? Meeting is adjourned.